So you're learning Biblical Greek and you want to get your first Greek New Testament. Which New Testament should you get? Well, in this video, we're going to look at that question. I'm going to give you two options and my recommendation as to which one you should get. Hi, I'm Darryl Burling from Master New Testament Greek, here to help you with the tools, habits, and system to master the Greek of the New Testament. If you're interested in learning to read the New Testament freely, fluently, exegetically, go ahead, hit the subscribe button, hit the notify bell, and I'll let you know when new videos are released. So a couple of weeks ago, I released a video where I said, don't buy an interlinear Greek New Testament. Now, a number of you wrote in and said, well, if we're not going to get an interlinear Greek New Testament, then what should I get? And so in this video, we're going to look at that question, and I'm going to give you my two options and why, and the pros and cons of each one, and a recommendation with why I think this is the best option. So let's start with those two options. Your two options really are, you can get a Reader's Edition of the Greek New Testament, which is what this is a Zondervan Reader's Edition. This is an older edition, but it's much the same as the more recent third, I think it's a third edition is out now, but this is a Reader's Edition. The other option is just a plain old Greek New Testament. Now there are pros and cons of each, and you want to be aware of the pros and cons before you step in and buy one or the other. So let's start with those pros and cons. What are they? Well, let's start with the Reader's Edition, okay? And again, we've got the Zondervan Reader's Edition here. What is a Reader's Edition? Well, simply put, a Reader's Edition of the Greek New Testament it's a Greek text, right? So you can see here, it's the Greek New Testament up the top, and then underneath, it has glosses for words that occur, in this case, I think it's 30 times or less in the Greek New Testament below. Okay, and so that means that you can be reading along, and when you get to a word, like here's a word here in Enken, it's got a number next to it, and you go down to the bottom, find that number, and there's the word, the lexical form of that word, along with a gloss to help you translate that word in the context. There's a lot of these out there. This is the Zondervan one, there's a Tyndale House one, I think there's a UBS one as well. There may be others that I'm not aware of, and so there's a number of these that you can choose from. The nice thing about this is that you're reading directly in the Greek, whereas in interlinear, you've got the English right there with you. This gets rid of the English, and you're really just working from the Greek. And the pros and cons of a Reader's Edition, first of all, it's a low bar to get started. You need to have been through beginning Greek. You need to learn the words that don't occur in here. So in this case, you need to know all the words that occur 30 times or more in the Greek New Testament. So you need to learn those words. You can't escape memorizing words, right? Or vocabulary. So those are the pros, right? It sets a low bar for entry. You can get one of these, and pretty quickly you can be reading the text of the New Testament. That's really why these have propped up, because people can't read Greek fluently, and these give you a lower bar so that you can start to get into reading the Greek New Testament. But there are some cons to a Reader's Edition. First of all, the glosses. Now, many of these glosses are really, really helpful. However, one of the things that you need to be aware of, and you'll be aware of this with the language anyway, is that words have what's called lexical range. Now, what that means is that a word doesn't just mean one thing, but based on the context, it can mean several different things. And sometimes words are even used metaphorically, so you don't even get the original and root meaning of the word in that context. It's being used metaphorically. And so in a Greek Reader's Edition, often you will find at the bottom of the page, the gloss that is given is either metaphorical or it's based on the context rather than on the actual root of the word. And so what that means is that rather than seeing the richness of this word, you're often just getting a gloss to help you keep reading. Now, that's helpful to just help you keep reading, but it also flattens out the language a bit, so you're not getting the full richness of the word. Now, I don't think there's any better way they could do this, but learning the words themselves and actually being able to read them and seeing how they're used has actually got some real benefit. So I sort of rate that as a con in some ways to a Reader's Edition. Now, the other thing too about a Reader's Edition is that it can incline you toward laziness. And I'm not saying that people who buy Reader's Editions are lazy. What I'm saying is that there's this potential to say, well, I have a Reader's Edition, I don't need to learn to read the Bible properly. I don't need to learn every gloss. I don't need to understand the language that richly. And so it gives you this, it tends toward that, I just don't need to go that far. And if you don't have a goal of reading the New Testament with that kind of level of fluency, then that's not a problem, right? So I'm not saying this is wrong. I'm just saying this is a con, that maybe it could give you a too much of a scaffold, too much of a help in a sense, to prevent you from actually going as far as maybe right now you want to go. If you do learn every word of the Greek New Testament, then this becomes redundant. Okay, so why would you need a reader's edition if you already know all the words at the bottom? And so this is where, and you can see here, I've hardly used this because while I started reading the New Testament and learning the vocabulary by occurrence, I switched to the Master New Testament Greek method now, and that means I didn't really need a reader's edition at all. So really what I'm highlighting here is the importance of your end goal and the methodology that you use. These are two really important aspects that you have to take into account when you're choosing a Greek New Testament. If your methodology is to learn vocabulary by occurrence, then you want a reader's edition. Okay, because that's what these are set up for. This is set up to take you through and learn vocabulary by occurrence. So that's a great approach for that. But if you want to get to the point where you're reading exegetically, where you're reading fluently, then this is not going to be a good long-term option for you. A better option in that case may be the full Greek New Testament. This is a Tyndale House Greek New Testament, and with a Greek New Testament, just a plain Greek New Testament, you can see it's just the Greek text. Now you do have some stuff at the bottom here, and this is actually one of the benefits of a full Greek New Testament. At the bottom, while you don't get any helps, right? You don't get any of that. What you do get is you get apparatus at the bottom. So you can choose the Tyndale Greek New Testament has a very small apparatus, but you could get the UBS for a slightly larger apparatus, or a Nestle Aland 27th or 28th edition for a much richer apparatus. So you get choices there of apparatus, where a reader's edition is not going to give you any apparatus whatsoever. So one of the benefits of a full Greek New Testament is you get the option of having the apparatus right there in the text with you. The other pro with this, again, depending on where your endpoint is. If your endpoint is to read exegetically, read fluently through the New Testament, then this is going to serve you for the long run, which again comes back to methodology. So if you're using the Master New Testament Greek method of learning vocabulary, that means that you can start pretty much, if you've got beginning Greek behind you, you can just start in the first piece of Master New Testament Greek, the student edition, and you can be reading the book of 1 John within a few days, okay, and potentially even the whole book, depending on how far you've already gone. And so that means that you can start within a few, maybe let's say 2 weeks, right? You can actually start reading this text without requiring any other help. And so that's really the benefit. You can very quickly outgrow the reader's edition and move directly onto a full Greek New Testament. And so I think, again, it comes back to your methodology and your endpoint, where you're going as to which one of these is more helpful. There are some cons with this. And the big con with the full Greek New Testament is that you have to work harder to be able to read it fluently. That's the challenge. Whereas with the reader's edition, you only have to learn a small number of words, beginning Greek, and you're done. The other thing with this, the other con with this, if you do get stuck, there's nothing there to help you, right? There's an apparatus maybe, and that's it. Otherwise, you just got the text. And your knowledge of perhaps the translations will help you there. What do I recommend? Let me give you quickly my recommendation. Then I want to just add something else to help you with this. But you can see here that the methodology and your endpoint are the two critical questions you want to ask when selecting a Greek New Testament. So here's the thing. I recommend the full Greek New Testament. And the reason for this is that this is going to last you the long term. It's also going to challenge you to get to a much richer knowledge of the text of the New Testament. So that's why I recommend this. Now, you might ask then, well, what about when I do get stuck? Because even if I take the Master New Testament Greek approach and I do learn every word in the Greek New Testament, and in fact, you might even say, well, who the heck does that? Well, let me give a shout out right here to one of my customers, Henry Au from Hong Kong, who emailed me just a couple of days ago and said, I've actually just finished learning every word in the Greek New Testament using the Master New Testament Greek Student Edition. So congratulations, Henry. That is a fantastic achievement. Keep up the great work. Now, Henry now can read the Greek of the New Testament without looking words up. Does that mean he's reading it like he's reading English? No, he's not. He's reading about six verses every day. But again, he's independent in that. Now, what happens when he gets stuck? What happens when you get stuck? What happens if you don't get to that level of fluency? What if you aren't able to identify an optative or pluperfect or whatever the form is, right? There was one of my professors when I was going through seminary who is now able to read the text of the New Testament fluently. So I said, how did you get to that point? And he said to me that what he did is he put a lexicon on the other side of the room. And that forced him to have to think about the word he was looking at carefully so that he didn't have to go walking across the room to find it. The point is that he had a disincentive to going and getting the tools. And that forced him to work harder to learn the text. So he was actually able to read the text fluently. Now, how do we work around this? How would I encourage you to do this? Well, here's what I encourage. I recommend the full Greek New Testament with a help like this. This is a reader's lexicon of the Greek New Testament. And what this gives you is the vocabulary of the entire Greek New Testament, but canonically ordered. So it is ordered by book, chapter, and verse. So, for instance, here I am in the Gospel of John, chapter 11, verse 13. And you can see here there are 2 words listed. Those 2 words are the only 2 words in that verse that occur less than 50 times. So you should know all the words in that verse if you know all the words occurring 50 times or more. And then the ones you get stuck on, you can just quickly look them up here. And of those 2, one of them is a hapax legomena. Actually, both of them are hapax legomena, but one of them occurs a little more often in the Gospel of John. So here's the thing, right? By doing that, what you're doing is you're then using that process of discovery as you're using a full New Testament to help you learn. And yes, it's going to take a little longer that way, but the result is that you're going to more quickly get to that point where you are reading exegetically, reading fluently. Okay, so that's my recommendation. I recommend you take a Greek New Testament and a reader's lexicon and you pair those together, and eventually you will outgrow the reader's lexicon and you won't need a reader's edition at all, because everything you need is here in these 2 books right here. Now, on top of that, I also recommend that you have a grammar nearby, so that if you do get stuck on forms, the Greek grammar that you learned under is right there and you can learn that as well. That's another way of approaching those problems. So, the approach is a Greek New Testament, just a plain Greek New Testament. When you get stuck, think first and then go to the tools and let that discovery process reinforce your learning and remind you of the things you already learned that maybe you've forgotten, so that eventually you don't even have to look those things up anymore at all. If this video has been helpful, go ahead, hit the like button and let me know in the comments too, which of these 2 approaches would you take and why? Would you take a reader's edition or would you take a full Greek New Testament? How does your methodology and your end point, your goal, affect your choice? Leave a note in the comments below and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, keep taking small steps. See you later.